Okay, well, it is my first official podcast, and I said that I wanted to start with, I guess, talking about me briefly and explaining kind of who I am and why I chose to create this podcast. So, my name is Ray, and I am 54 in 9 days. I'll be 54 years old. I am a newly discovered empath and highly sensitive person. And thanks to a woman called Elaine Aaron, a woman named Elaine Aaron, who wrote the book The Highly Sensitive Person. Thanks to her, I realized who I am, found the missing pieces to the puzzle of what is my life this long up until 50. I had been writing a book, started writing a book before I actually flew to California. I started writing my book in 2014 or 15 and put it down. Had some challenges, of course, of not expecting to move to LA and then having to just get into the thick of it and look for a job and survive and figure out where to go and figure out how to get around and so once I got all that done and was able to get gainfully employed and start to feel comfortable in, actually then it was Orange County, um, I didn't actually even start picking it up and start writing again. I was writing a little bit at a time, but not just sitting down and writing chapters and chapters and chapters. I was writing a chapter here or there, maybe some notations, getting stuff out of my head. And then eventually I had to leave. COVID happened and I had enough time to take off. And I was working on my van, being the loner, of course, an introvert that I've always been. I don't have any problems at all entertaining myself, spending time alone. That comes from my childhood, growing up with two brothers. Most of the time, if I wasn't with family in Virginia, my mother's side of the family, staying with my aunt and her family, I was pretty much at home to myself, doing for myself, being to myself, reading, imagining. I did spend time with my second oldest brother. Everything he did, I wanted to do, so I would chase him around. I played basketball and played marbles and stuff like that because he had them. I didn't have an older sister. I just had brothers, and my oldest brother was 10 years older than me. So, but we had a lot of freedom back then in the 70s and 80s. My parents divorced when I was 12, and my father stayed around until he had to move away, and he moved away right before, I think that was my junior year in high school. He moved to Texas, and maybe not too long after he left me a car, so that gave me freedom to be able to go get a job and not have to rely on my mom to take me to work. So I was pretty responsible as a young adult. I had a car, I had a job, and then right before my senior year, the summer before my senior year, we moved from South Carolina near Clemson to Atlanta, which was only about an hour and a half away, where my oldest brother was living at the time. So we moved down there. My second oldest brother was in college in Ohio at the time, so it was just me and my mother. Estranged. I mean, we were in the same house, but you know, I had my life, I had my car, I worked when I wasn't at school, and yeah, so I'm giving a little bit of a backstory to my life. I wrote it in my book, explained some things about my childhood in my book, and but I think that it lends to who I am and how I've turned out. Um, I wanted children. I wanted a large family. I wanted about 12 kids growing up the way that I did. And my mom is the third of 15 from the bottom. So most of my mom's sisters are much older than her. My mom's oldest sister 20 years older than she was. And that was my favorite. She passed away back in, I think, 97 from cancer. Um, and I miss her a lot. My Aunt Louise she was my protector. She kept my mama kind of off me. My mom respected, of course, her because she helped raise her. So, yeah, my aunts, a few of my aunts had large families. My Aunt Louise, she had 7 kids, and I kind of fell in line with close to being the youngest at the time. There was a time where I was kind of the baby until my cousin came along, Sean came along. And so, being at her house, it felt comfortable. It felt, yeah, I was picked on because I was different and I asked a lot of questions and that sort of thing. But I always felt like I could go there, and so I did. Any break that I had from school, I was at my aunt's house. When I was away from college, I would call my aunt and say, "Hey, can I come and visit you and be there?" And so I did a lot until, like I said, until she passed away in '97. It hasn't really felt like the same, and the house. I don't think the house is in the family anymore. So, but now I digress. But back to me and why I chose to start this podcast. As I said, just working at the airport is where it kind of started, because prior to me working at the airport in LA, and I guess prior to me coming to LA, I worked basically one on one with customers, clientele. I started a consulting business when I was 26 called Neil's Consulting on Hilton Head Island in Bluffton, in that area of the Low Country. And the goal was to do software installs, hardware installs, help people, educate them about computers and how to use them, and more specifically, the older generation. At that time, the average age of the residents on the island were over 60. Now the demographic has changed, but back then there were a lot of older people that had money, to be honest, and I could charge a fair rate for the time. I think back then I was charging 25 or $50 an hour, um, to go out, go to people's houses, explain to them, the components of a computer and how to save stuff, and once they save something, where to go to find what they saved, and um, if they had any troubleshooting or any issues. Some people, I think they just really. I had one client, she was from the Czech Republic, and Yolanda, um, her daughter and her son. Her daughter lived in Italy, and her son was in Germany, or vice versa, and they never came to see her. And I think she was just lonely, and she just kind of wanted some companionship. So she would ask me to come over, and she really was into doing poetry. So she bought a computer, and so she needed just an understanding of, okay, how do I write my poems? What program do I need to write my poems rather, and where do I save it? And okay, how do I retrieve it once I've saved it if I want to work on it again? And so I would go over to her house, and she lived in a gated community on Hilton Head, and I would go over there, and she got very, very comfortable with me, and even asked me to move in with her. I didn't do it, but I know that was more. She was just comfortable with me. She shared a lot about her life back in Europe, and escaping some things and atrocities back in the. I guess as old as she is. I think she's not here anymore. Last time I saw her, she didn't remember who I was. I think dementia or Alzheimer's had set in, and she was being cared for. But I went to check on her, and sadly, she just didn't remember who I was. So, and that was a while ago. So I don't. I think it's safe to say that she's transitioned or made a transition by now. But but prior to me coming or going to Los Angeles, I always worked, kind of one on one. I didn't work in the general public sector. And I went to school, I got the scholarship, so I was going to school for computer aided drafting. And because I had gone to college for architecture back in the late 80s, 90s, my dream was to be an architect. But my oldest brother got sick when I was in college, and I moved home to help my mother take care of him until he passed away. So life just didn't work out for me to graduate and get my degree, but I still like to draw. And so I had an opportunity to go to school on a scholarship in 2000. I believe it was 2000. So I had a 2-year scholarship to get a drafting degree or certification. So I did that, and my intention was to get back into drafting, get back into doing house plans or residential plans or business plans or commercial plans. And God had other plans for me, and I ended up getting recruited by an engineering firm, electrical engineering firm in Atlanta. When I got back, because it's a long story, but I ended up going overseas. I went to Barcelona, and my intention was to stay over there after I graduated from my 2-year program. I just was kind of fed up with the United States, and just I wanted to do something different. And as my book says, as I wrote in my book, I got over there, but I couldn't find a job and whatnot, so I had to come back to the States. And so once I came back to the States, I was still looking for a job overseas, and in the interim, I ended up buying a house and started working, as I said, as a drafter, as a engineering drafter, commercial drafter, engineering drafter. So I was doing repeaters and poles, what they call POTS, played old telephone service. So I was doing design for cable, electrical systems for residential neighborhoods, for new design and retro. So if you lived in a community or lived in a subdivision, then I designed, the engineers would go out and they would field walk your neighborhood, and they'd write everything out on a map, big map, piece of paper. And then they would come back in, and someone would digitize that map. And then I would take the digitized part of that map, a section of, let's say, your street, and I would sit down and I would design what they call the plant, which is the lines outside, the electrical poles that you see in your neighborhood, aerial poles for your electricity, your cables on that pole as well. And so I just sat in a cubicle with other drafters, and didn't have to worry about the public. It was just, I just went in and I sat down with my peers, and we designed all day, laughed and talked, listened to music, but we were in our own worlds just getting projects done. And that's, of course, more money, of course. Um, and that's what I did for, I guess, from, what did I do? I started doing that when I got back. So I bought my house in 2005. So I started doing that about 2000 until 2008. So for 8 years, we went from when the fiscal money ran out from one business, uh, moved to another one. So it was just a community of people, of drafters and engineers. And I did it until I got to the point where I was actually the engineer that would go out and work and look at fiber optic plant positions. And that's when I lived in Brunswick, Georgia, where the guy got killed. And I would drive out to Valdosta and other parts of the southern Georgia to look at plant, to look at poles. I actually did some time in Birmingham after there was a tornado that came through there, and it was a lot of different engineers that were required to go to Birmingham and set up in this office and just repair the town, as it were. So it was drafters that were sitting in a room all day, and we would just, draft and design what the engineers who were out on the streets, doing the field work at that point. And I eventually got to the point where I was able to do field work myself, and that's what I was intending to do as a career until the recession of 2008, and I lost my job, I lost my house, and I had to basically start all over again. So fast forward to um, 2016, 2015, when I moved to California again. That was for an IT job that was supposed to help me get back on my feet and get out my dad's pocket and make some decent money, more than decent money, because it was just going to be working for the IRS. I had gone through all the steps with the IRS to get a security clearance, a high security clearance, to travel around the world, sleeping in hotels, getting a per diem plus my pay to just refresh their computers and go from Windows 95 to I think at the time it was Windows 10, Windows Vista 10. So it's going to be something that I was used to doing, IT work, easy. And so I let the recruiter know that I was going to California. I was going to get myself there, which was what you had to do to get started. You got to jumpstart yourself, and then the money would start to be reimbursed. And the day after I got to California, I called the recruiter and said, "Hey, I made it to California." And the recruiter goes, "Oh, yeah, about that. The contract fell through." So I was like, "Shit, I got to figure it out. I got to either go back to Atlanta, where the market at the time was in the trash and everybody was looking for work, and my real estate license, which I had, I kind of hung that up because the market was just terrible for real estate. I had just got my real estate license, and I've always been a hustler and an entrepreneur, so I was really trying to make my own way while I was working as an engineer until I got enough clients that I could sustain myself. And then I really, my life goal for the last 15 years is to be autonomous and work for myself and not have to rely on anybody else for my income. And so it turned out that I ended up having to stay in LA and until I didn't. And I'd never thought about energy and how it affects your mood and how it affects my mood, I should say specifically, until I started working at the airport. And when I started working there, it took a while for me. As I said, I started working at the airport when I was 45. So 5 years of going through being drained and going home tired and going home angry and going home with all these emotions and reactions to people at work and not really understanding myself and being anxious in a way that I had never really been anxious before and just dealing with just angry customers every day, all day, began to affect me. And so when COVID broke out and American offered anyone, the chance to get off their books, as it were, and to take a leave, I thought about it, talked to my dad about it, talked to my best friend at the time who had a house in Missouri, and she had gotten a job offer in Maryland, so her house was going to be empty. And when I say empty, like she was taking all of her stuff and moving, from St. Louis to Maryland. So I had my apartment in California, but I was on a lease, month to month lease at that time. So we worked it out. Everything fell into place for me to move out of my apartment and pack all my stuff up and basically get out of Dodge for 14 months. So I had a plan to build a van and buy a van because the money was really good at that time for people who were taking the leave. And of course, I didn't expect to be getting paid or compensated as I did, but the money was good enough for me to buy a van. And because I had the time and I thought about it before I left, the goal was to not have to worry about paying rent once I got back, because that was a stressor for living in LA and the high cost of everything and me on a very tight budget. Car note, my rent was crazy. for a studio. I'm paying almost $1,200, almost $1,300 for a small room at the time. So I decided to take a leave. Didn't know what was going to happen, but I have a commercial driver's license, so I was still planning on being employed somehow, making it work for myself. I still had flight benefits. So I was just, thinking outside of the box, looking for a way to still be able to sustain myself financially, not rely on, unemployment or anything like that until everything was on lockdown and nobody was moving. So that gave me time to like I said, work on my van and figure out me and some things and process some things mentally that I had been going through away from California. And when it came time for me to go back to LA, I communicated with my biological mother and I started getting anxious again. And I told her, I said, I'm not really feeling going back to LA. And I had been telling her for a while. She knew how I was before I was leaving. I wasn't eating. My stress had gotten so crazy that I'd lost a whole lot of weight, and people just didn't understand it because I guess I didn't communicate it very well to people. So when my mom came to visit prior to COVID, she came to see me, and I had been telling her I don't have an appetite. I can't hold anything down. I can't keep anything down unless I was smoking, and it is California, so I'm just saying. And that's the only way that I had an appetite. And so she came to see me, and I asked her to cook me something. I had never had spaghetti squash before, so I bought a squash and she cooked it. And I came home from work and I sat down with a bowl, a small bowl, and I ate one spoonful. And I told her I can't eat anymore. I started getting nauseous. So my mother being a healer and my mother being, I call it the bush woman, the maternal line of my family, they are endowed with spiritual gifts as I am, as I'm learning about myself. And so she laid me down, she pulled out her pendulum and started asking questions about my chakras and my stomach, because I'm a Virgo and I've had ulcers before from stress. And so she brought some stuff with her from South Carolina on her trip, and gave me some things I needed to do to try to heal myself, to work on myself internally. So, as I said, I took the leave because I just needed to get out of LA and away from the stress, from just everything, work and living there. And so when it came time for me to go back, I wasn't really feeling going back. So my mother, she just made one statement that changed my life. And she said, "You might be more of an empath than you realize." So I was like, what? What's an empath? So I started looking online, like, okay, and of course, when you start to look for answers, they come. So I didn't necessarily want to get my answers from the aspect of, no offense, but from someone who didn't look like me. So I was looking online and they had all these 10 reasons why you might be an empath, but they were all from people who didn't look like me. So when I found this brother and his description of an empath and the things that he had himself experienced, and I was like, wow, that does sound familiar. Yeah, I have felt that. I have gone through this. I have done that. Um, and then it led me to, I have an Audible account. So I just typed in empath. I don't know how I got to highly sensitive person, but all my life, my father, who's been an integral part of my life, all my life, has always kind of called me out on being sensitive. But it was always in a way, sorry, Daddy, but he would always say, "You too damn sensitive. You're so damn sensitive." And it just never felt like a compliment. It just felt like that was something that bothered people. And when I would open up and talk to people and be myself, the more I felt comfortable in their presence, I would be sensitive. I am sensitive. And that includes crying. Maybe it is part of that clingy, people pleasing part of our personalities that I have been accused of being in the past. Not anymore. I think I'm delivered from being a people pleaser. I'm kind and I'm considerate, but having had the time to really look at myself over the years and this self discovery and as they say, the dark night of the soul that I've gone through, I'm not the same person. Not the same person that I was 5 years ago. Definitely not 4 years ago. But as I said, I started listening to Elaine Aron's book on my Audible account while I'm working on my van, and she took me back to my childhood, and I saw myself as this broken little girl that I hadn't really looked at or thought about like that in a long time, and it just put pieces together. And the questions that I had in my head about, well, why did I do this, and why do I do that, and why is my relationship with my mom so fucked up, and as I'm asking these questions in my mind, the more I listened to the audio book, the more the answers were being revealed to me. The more I just kept listening and listening and listening and crying and listening and crying and listening and weeping for my younger self and listening and learning to have compassion for my younger self. I um I ended that book. I felt like I had graduated. I felt like, damn, now I know myself. Now I understand why I've been so quirky. Now I understand why I've been maybe socially awkward all this time. And I've given myself grace to uh, be okay with it. Stop beating myself up with the things that I did, the decisions that I made in my life, not understanding um, why I did some certain things. Now I get it. Now I get it. And I think that I've gotten it to be able to. I couldn't help anybody. I could talk to people. I could give my advice on certain things, but I think it took me going through, as I said, my dark night of the soul, and despite all the shit that I've been through with both of my mothers, I was adopted as a baby, so I grew up with one person. And then I met the person that I came out of when I was 24. And that relationship has been all over the place. And as of right now, as of me recording this, I have no relationship with either of them. Um, I welcome it. I welcome a relationship with both of them, but I only welcome a healthy relationship. And sadly, my mom is 80, probably always going to be who she's always been. And my mother that raised me, when I met her, she was 42. So I'm older than how old she was when I met her. But I haven't seen or spoken to her since before I went to Rome. So that was probably about 3 years ago. And that was only a brief encounter that I saw her before I got on a flight. So she did send me a card telling me that she was proud of me when I sent her. I sent both of them my book. I don't know that my mom read my book. But my biological mother, she did read it, and she said she was proud of me. So, I mean, that's all I could do is believe that she's proud of me. But as far as it helping our relationship, I released myself from the outcome of both of them. I love them, and I hope that things do get better. But I want to end this here. If you are interested in knowing and hearing more about me and my story, um, stay tuned. I finally decided to do this while I've had the energy to do it. And yeah, so In the meantime, if you're as intrigued as I hope you are, go to my website. It's theresaray.com. It's the number three, SARAYE.com. And there you will find a link to my Amazon book, or my book that's on Amazon. And you can order it. And yeah, support me, support my podcast. Please like and follow this YouTube channel. I would like for my followers to grow, and yeah, just my intention is to share my gifts, and any advice that I could give someone who's unsure about themselves, who just found out that they're an empath. Welcome. Just found out that you're highly sensitive, and you're not crazy. Let me be the first to tell you, you're not crazy. No matter how much people might try to gaslight you and make you feel like you're crazy, you're not. You're just part of a very, very exclusive community, and you have a very special personality trait that everybody doesn't have. And so, yeah, I plan on bringing people on the podcast that I think are just as quirky as I am, that are also empaths, introverts. And yeah, I might just have some people on here just to bullshit and laugh and make things light. And as I said, there's different parts of my personality, and I'm not afraid to show any or all of it anymore. So I pressed myself today. I did a reel. I woke up with after having a really crazy dream. And yeah, so I don't want to procrastinate anymore. I don't want to go into another year of my life wanting something different, but not getting off my ass and doing it. So as you can see, I got my green screen behind me, my microphone. I hope this thing is recording these 32 minutes that I've been speaking. And yeah, I'm also working on some other stuff. I want to start getting into public speaking and helping people that way, sharing my story. So yeah, I'm gonna take you guys on my journey of going to Toastmaster classes, as many as I can get to on my days off. And thank God, I'm so grateful for my flight benefits, because these Toastmaster classes are not going to be here local, so I will have to get on a plane. But yeah, I want my next year to be prosperous financially, and yeah, because who knows what this presidential election is gonna bring, and I need to be fully sustainable on my own. So that's what I'm working on, is being able to take care of myself while I'm helping others. And so, one thing that I've been told over and over again, and I do also believe is true, is that in order for me to get what I want, I have to help you get what you want. So, with that being said, thank you for your time. This has been mine. I hope to see you next time. Peace.